having that native input is what really makes the difference.
This is the Inbound Forecast, a podcast series about inbound marketing and organic growth for B2B companies. Here's your host, Gerald Arcus.
Gemma, welcome to my podcast. Good morning.
Thank you. Morning. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I am great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good too. We had a little bit of a messy start of this podcast because of the tools, but I think everything should be good now. I hope so for the listeners. Before we start this episode, I want to thank Play Forward, the agency who's helping me with the vertical videos for TikTok and YouTube Shorts. So thanks. We are talking today about a few topics: events, LinkedIn live sessions, and localization strategies for B2B, for international companies. But before we start, can you start with an introduction of yourself and share one thing that most people don't know about you?
Oh, you didn't give me a heads up on that question. So the first bit I should be able to do. So yeah, I am the director of marketing at Webcertain. So we're an international digital agency, so specializing in international and in helping global businesses expand more around the world. And we're part of TransPerfect, which is a very large language service and technology provider, providing all sorts of services around localization, globalization, and all the rest of it. So I've been at Webcertain for over 15 years now, so a really long time. And as part of that, worked in quite a lot of, or done quite a lot of different projects when it comes to trying to boost our marketing and work on different things. So obviously we are targeting a B2B audience because we're an agency. So yeah, tried different things and seen how maybe things have evolved quite a lot over the past 10 to 15 years when it comes to digital, especially. One thing that people don't know about me. Oh goodness, this is really hard. I'm finding this really hard.
It doesn't have to be something that nobody knows, but maybe for the listeners of this podcast, something personal or something strange.
Something strange. Oh my goodness, this is like a really hard question to think about.
What we can do is you can answer it at the end of the episode.
Okay,
then we have
great.
a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we can start with the international marketing part. So the customers that you work for are all companies that are not only based in the UK or work for UK customers, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I think what you are doing when I check the website, it's for a part SEO, but it's more broad than that. Also advertising, I think, and other tactics channels. Can you tell me a bit about the approach and the things that are important for companies that are not just based in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our clients aren't based in the UK yet at all, so they can be based anywhere really, and they're targeting different countries. So it can be, we work with clients that maybe only target one or two other countries, and then some that have got presence in 140 countries. So it can really, really vary. And the main thing that or the crucial thing that's important and that we would start with every client that we work with or when we're doing any new project is really good research. And I think that sometimes can be missing when businesses decide to go international. They go, oh, I think Germany sounds like a really good market, let's just go there. And they don't really spend much, let's just do it, let's get a few German pages and let's just do it. And it doesn't really work. You've really got to put some proper time and spend the time before you get going to really understand the market, to see what's different, to understand, because there's so many things that will vary, the way that people behave, how they might search for your product, how they might use your product, what the competitor landscape's like, what the regulations are, the list goes on, which channels people use. There's just so many different things. And I think if you skip that step, which is true with many things, the research step is often the one that people want to skip because it takes time and it seems a bit tedious and you just want to get going and let's just launch and see what happens. But actually, it really is worth doing that, because if you don't, you can just go totally down the wrong avenue. You can end up spending a lot of money on something that isn't going to work, and then having to go back and start again, or also just kind of writing off a country saying, you know what, it doesn't work here. And actually it could have done if you just put that research in the first place. So that's definitely a really important thing to be doing. Whether that's, if you're starting entirely in a new market, or even if you're already doing something there, but you may be launching a new product or going down a new route, it's like always go back to that research as the starting point.
Yeah, when I look at Dutch companies that I know that, for example, also go to Germany, a lot of them just think we have to translate our content and then it should be fine, but it's not. What do you think are the biggest mistakes or things that people forget or do wrong when they do start with that?
So I think it is often that it's that assumption that, well, it's just the same thing, but just as long as we've got the right language, then it's fine. And of course it isn't, because the things that make sense to people, the way that people consume information, just the references that can be in content. And I think this is really what is often missed, that you think, well, we've translated it accurately, which, yes, great, it makes sense to somebody. But if everything in there, if there's things in the content that are more specific to another country, or that aren't actively thinking about the country that you're targeting straight away to somebody in that country, it's going to feel like it's a translation and not content written for them. And in some cases, maybe you don't mind that it's a translation. There'll be some scenarios where you may be looking for something from a different country, and that's fine. But in most cases, you want to feel like that's it's intended for you. And I think if even the content on the website seems like it's just a quick translation and hasn't really been thought through, that doesn't give you much confidence that the rest of the service you're going to get is going to be very tailored. So you think, well, is there going to be a number I can call and actually speak to somebody if I need help? Are they going to understand some of the challenges that I'm going to have, specifically because of the way things are set up in this country? Do they know the laws that mean that I can't do things in a certain way? And it's really important to look beyond that and think about everything that's on your page, everything that's in your content. Is it relevant? Do the images make sense? Again, if you're showing loads of images of a location and they're all in different countries to the one you're targeting, it might, again, not it's not going to make them feel like it's really intended for them. So I think it's a lot of that. It's around making sure that you are speaking directly to every country that you're targeting. And that is also true when, of course, it's the same language but different countries. So you'll get people saying, well, we've got German, so we can easily do Austria and Switzerland. Well, you've still got to make those changes because they don't use exactly the same version of German. They've got they're different languages, essentially. A lot of vocabulary is different. Again, the way that they operate, the things that matter to them, they're all different. So you've got to really, really think about that.
Yeah, I was talking a few weeks ago with a company who is selling solar panels. And for example, the houses are completely different in all these
Yeah,
countries. And that's hard for them to find a solution, but
yeah.
it's very important.
Yeah. And it is things like that. I mean, I don't know the details of solar panels, but you can imagine that maybe the way that they plug in, the voltage, the way that they actually work, not to mention the design of the houses, and all of those things are crucial. And that's the kind of thing that if you don't do the research, you go and suddenly launch these solar panels in a country where they won't fit on any houses. It's a total waste of time and money. So it's really, and it's surprising how many things are different in different countries. And I think that's what was one of the most interesting things. The more you work in international, the more you travel as well, you just realize that, yeah, just little things, just the way that prices are displayed, or the way that things are served in restaurants. There's just so many little things that are different that really can, or that make that country feel like that country. And if you go in doing something in a totally different way, that is very obvious to people from that country that it's not really been directed at them. And the thing is, now in most cases you're going to have competition. They're going to have local competition and maybe other international competition. And if you're not making the best effort, somebody else will be making, doing a better job of it, and they're probably going to then therefore outperform you, because the customer looks at both and says, well, this is much more relevant to me, and resonates with me so much better.
Yeah, but it also seems hard because you are based in the UK. So how do you get the knowledge, or how do you then do the research, for example, to go to Austria for a company. Do you talk to customers or to people there, or yeah, how do
Yeah,
you
so
approach
it
it?
will vary quite a lot. So our team, we have quite an international team. So we have people from a lot of different countries working in our team who'll do the research for their own country. Um, in some cases, also, we use certain tools. For example, we do quite a lot of work using social listening and that kind of thing, where we will um, do that research into the different countries using the tools. We do also sometimes, depending on what the client wants and the project, we do customer interviews sometimes to build up a picture that way. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but you do generally need some form of kind of native or expert knowledge of a market to really get into it, because there's only so much research you can do from a um, from the perspective, if you can't really look into the language, if you can't really review content in that language, and also if you don't understand that those cultural nuances and those language nuances yourself, because you'd easily overlook things because you just don't know they're there. So having that native input is what really makes the difference, because they can say, no, we'd never say that, or no, that joke would just doesn't make sense in this, like, to us, that, or that's not something we would find funny. It's things like that that you can't know unless you are very familiar with the market or from there.
Yeah, but I think also a challenge might be that it's very expensive because there are translation tools. For example, we have all of these AI possibilities right now. Um, but yeah, letting real people check it and read it and give feedback, that's the expensive part. So is that a challenge?
I think it is expensive, or doesn't have to be expensive, but it is more. It's definitely costs more than just bunging something in a translation tool. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, but the difference is huge. Yes, AI is getting better. Yes, that it improves things, and there's ways that you can use machine learning and in translation and in localization that speeds up the process, but you can't rely on it entirely because it's not that accurate. Certainly, if you're trying to write content in other languages using AI, I mean, it's not brilliant in English, and I think it's definitely less good in other languages as well. So, if you do that again, it will not feel like it's been written by a person. It will, somebody reading it will be able to tell straight away that it's not natural
Yeah.
language, that it's not good quality. The actual messaging could be wrong. You don't know that. So yes, there is cost in doing it, and that's why a good strategy, especially if you're starting out, especially if you don't have huge budgets, is to not go all in and translate. Say, right, we need to localize our entire website if you've got hundreds and hundreds of pages, because that is going to take a lot of time and money. Select key pages, the key pages that are important for people learning about you, and maybe a few product pages that you're going to start with, and start with them, but do them properly and see how it goes. And if it's going, you can then scale it up over time and add more. But that's definitely something we recommend when we're starting. If somebody's going into a new business is going into a new country, is let's just start smaller and build it up rather than do everything, because again, you don't know how it's going to work. And if you just go in and if you do everything in one way and then you go, oh, that's not quite right, you've got to go back and start again. So start smaller and build it up, and then it's easier to do that. But there's no kind of silver bullet solution for doing localization quickly and cheaply. There's ways to make it quicker and cheaper than maybe and make it more efficient, but you still need that human intervention. You still need people checking it, adding their knowledge to the content and all of that, if you really want to make it of any quality. And we know, the way that search engines are going, especially Google now, there's all this focus on quality. And it's not just from that perspective either. People, users, consumers are more savvy and more discerning. They want better quality too, and they are not going to buy from a company that they think can't even put together a web page. So I think it's it's a false economy to try and cut corners and do it cheaply. It rarely pays off to do it that way. So
Yeah. Is Google a big challenge? Because, for example, with the hreflang tags, sometimes you can implement it the way it should be, but then Google still doesn't listen and show the wrong page to the wrong audience. So do you see that a lot?
I think, yeah, hreflang. I mean, so we run an event and it's all about international search, and hreflang is like the core topic that comes up every time, and people have questions on because it is challenging and it is easy to get wrong. And like you say, even if you kind of do get it right, it doesn't always mean that. But generally, I think if you do implement it properly and check that out and really take the time and or use somebody that is more specialized in that to do it, then it tends we tend to be able to fix those issues. We have had clients come. So we had one case study that we've got where we had a big manufacturing client based in the US, with obviously does a lot of business in the UK as well, and their UK page was ranking in the US and just totally taking it wasn't was causing major problems, and it was an hreflang issue. Our team looked at it all. I mean, it's complicated and it takes a long time to, because there's a lot of, if it's a big website, there's a lot of code on there. There's a lot of pages linking to each other, and you get one wrong, and it all goes a little bit wrong. So, but it did then rectify. So I think it generally, I think, does work if it is done really well. And it is a case of a bit of a digging, a bit of an investigation. I think if it's not right, you've just got to keep looking and find what's there. I mean, Google isn't always going to get it right 100%, but um, hreflang certainly helps when it comes to the geo-targeting side. Without that, you are very much relying on Google just being able to figure it out through the language on the page and everything else, and that is very unlikely to work very well now.
Yeah. And are you also looking at, for example, everybody in the last weeks in the Netherlands is talking about Hey Gen, where you can translate videos with your own voice with lip sync. So
Mm.
it looks like I'm speaking German, for example. Um, yeah, do you think that tools like that or techniques like that will impact your work a lot in the next years?
I don't know. It's always hard to tell at the start when things are just becoming kind of bigger. And I think there's going to be tools that probably do get better and do make certain things like that easier. So there certainly might be things that suddenly tools can do that kind of localization companies then don't need to do. But again, I think it's very unlikely that you are going to get to a point where the tools do it all anytime soon anyway, and there's no need for people, because there's still always going to be those errors that happen. And I think it depends how you're using it. If you're using it because you just want to get out to lots of places, and they know that that's how you're doing it, and obviously they're going to, you're going to know that it's not that person speaking that language. If it's, somebody well known saying, look, I'm suddenly doing a podcast in 45 languages, it's probably not you speaking those. So you kind of going to take it with a slight pinch of salt, like, well, at least I can hear you, what you've got to say. I don't mind so much. But again, I think when you're going back to kind of a brand website and the content that you're putting out there, you're still going to want to make sure that there's not mistakes in it. You're still going to want to make sure that it is accurate. And it
Yeah,
also,
oh, sorry.
you may, well, also, if you're just using, it goes back to that thing of how much effort are you putting into that country. If you're just taking somebody in another country and making them pretend to speak the language of that country, again, it might not land that well with the customers, depending on the business, depending on the product. They might rather hear from a real person in that market speaking, not just a kind of a voiceover version of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, but sometimes it can be hard. So I have a few let's say most of my customers are global companies, so they also have offices or yeah locations in different countries. And I like to work a lot with audio, with video, especially for B2B. I think video, for example, can be very powerful. But when I want to create a video, for example, to answer three of the most important questions about a very complex solution, it becomes very expensive if I have to do it in
Yep.
13 languages with different people,
Yep.
different companies, because you can't hire one
Yep.
person who is filming it and flies around the world. So then most companies just don't do it.
No.
And I
No,
hope
and
that
that's
will
that is
change.
where these things could come in handy, maybe for that additional bits of content. But again, maybe you, like you say, to actually go and produce a video and film people in different locations, that that is prohibitive for most people and you're not going to do it. So maybe that is the good solution, but you still would then need to make sure you've got people reviewing
Yeah.
reviewing the the videos, as long as you've got that function that you can edit it so that they can go, no, that's not the right way to do it, and that's not, that doesn't sound very good, and all of that. If it can be done that way, then that's probably is a good solution. And it's a bit like some of um, the tools that can be used already in translation, where they repeat things that have already been um, translated before. The translation tools can remember those and pull them back in, but you still need somebody to just review it and make sure that what they have, that the tools have got it right, and that is the right context, and that is the right language. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's ways to use the technology. It's just not going, oh, great, we don't need to worry about localization anymore because there's some tools and they can do it for us. It's just got to be used like if you're doing it in your own language, whatever. It's just got to be used with caution and care to make sure that it's still, the quality that you'd want to be putting out.
Yeah, and for most of these companies, I am the Dutch person who have to check it for the Netherlands.
Mm,
And sometimes it's already good, and I don't have to change
yeah,
anything in a lot of cases. But sometimes it's completely wrong, and there are
yeah,
very strange words in the translation. So yeah, you have to do that check.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Maybe we can go to the next topic.
Hmm.
Um, LinkedIn Live.
Yeah.
Um, when I scrolled through your LinkedIn profile, I saw some sessions about, or it's called Webcertain TV. So I think your
Hmm.
own live session platform on LinkedIn. Can you share some information about what you are doing there and how it helps your company?
Yeah, so we have started doing some sessions as LinkedIn Live. So we did do quite a lot of webinars over the last few years. Um, and then in the last year, we've kind of moved away from doing so many on kind of webinar platforms and your more standard webinar format, and doing them on LinkedIn Live. And I think it's really got a few benefits. I mean, it depends again how you want to do it, and there'll be some people that wouldn't like it for the reason, but it's a lot easier. People can just join as and when, you can click a button, just say, oh, let me know when this starts or whatever, and then you can join it. Um, and you can pick it up at any time. You don't have to sign in with load. You can have the option with LinkedIn Live. You can either have people have to register so you get their emails, or not. You can
Yeah,
just have them
there's a
join.
lot of
Or
this. Oh, sorry.
sorry, no, go on.
Yeah, I wanted to say there's a lot of discussion in B2B marketing about gated content.
Yeah.
So, for example, people don't want to put a white paper behind the form.
Mm.
And maybe the LinkedIn live sessions are the ungated version of the webinar, right?
Basically, that's it. Yeah, it is that thing that you don't then have people, yeah, necessarily, you have to sign up. So you've got their email and you've got this way of it following them up afterwards and sending them the recording. But that, I'm not sure how effective that always is anymore anyway. And actually, by having it on LinkedIn, the great thing is that people can watch it live, which is great, and they can comment, and you can get some, discussion going, which is quite nice. And people can dip in and out, but also it remains on your profile and your platform, on the platform afterwards. And we've seen with ours that you get quite a lot of views after the event, so people don't watch it live because, and that's often, I mean, that's, we know that with webinars anyway, the attendance rate versus the sign up rate is a lot lower because people sign up and then don't turn up because they haven't got time, and in many cases they never intended to, they just want to watch it back at some point when they've got time. So this is a bit the same, but it's just there. They don't have to go and look for it. They don't have to sign in and get a link, and they just can watch it, and they can watch a bit of it. They can watch all of it. So it's just opening up that content a bit. And I think, yeah, it makes it, yes, you can't necessarily kind of see exactly how many people, who was viewing for how long. You get an overall kind of view of the analytics, but you can't look at individuals, how long they were there for. But again, if you're there, if they're following you, and then on LinkedIn, you can connect with them on LinkedIn. You can build those relationships that way. And again, if the quality of what you're putting out is good, and you're building, they're interested in what you're saying, then they'll come back and watch more. They'll get in touch with you if they want something. So I think you can encourage them to sign up for your newsletters, or you can use the LinkedIn Live to encourage them to kind of connect with you in different ways. But it's maybe just slightly less cumbersome than a webinar. And
Yeah.
you need to use a streaming platform to do it, but they're not expensive. I think you can get them for, $10 a month or something, the cost of that. It's not, and they're not difficult to set up. And that's it. You're not paying for a platform that you need to, a hosting platform. So that is
Yeah, I think
also,
for StreamYard, we were trying to record this
yeah,
podcast with StreamYard, but it was my first recording. I had some problems with the connection, but I think it's $20 a month, something
yeah,
like that. The
something like that.
subscription I have, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem for any company, right?
No, it's cheaper than paying for however much you have to pay to, host webinars. And you can, you've got the chat function, people can comment, you can share videos, you can share your screen, you can do all the things that you would need to do in a standard webinar. So I do think it's interesting, and I think I've seen a few happen, but there's not still that many happening. So I think it's still a relatively new idea for a lot of businesses, and they're not really necessarily exploring it fully yet. But I know that, yeah, I'm kind of think it's working quite well so far, and I'm kind of keen to try more. We're going to try some different topics on it, and try and do it maybe in some different ways. We've been doing more kind of panel discussions, which is quite good, but we're going to do some more kind of content focused sessions as well, and just kind of see how they go. But and I know there's a few other people I've spoken to when I was looking at doing it who have been doing it and have quite positive about it as well, in the B2B area. So I think it is something to definitely consider
Yeah.
as
What
a,
is the biggest goal that you have with the live sessions? The most
I
important
think,
one?
so the most important one really is the awareness. So the ones we've been doing recently is around the event that we're doing. So they're with the speakers who are going to be speaking at the event and around some of the core topics. So that's the aim with that is to just drive, well, bookings, of course, to the event, but just kind of making sure people are aware the event's happening, who the speakers are, what kind of what's going on. And it's another way to kind of help with the promotion of that. Um, with the other, if with the content we're going to do a bit later in the year, which is more around not our services as in promoting them, but around the services that we offer and why certain markets that you need to target and that kind of thing. That is more about obviously getting in front of people who are interested in that and hopefully leading them to be more interested in Webcertain. And ideally inquire with us, but it's a process, and it's not, I think with this one you can't directly follow exactly where people are coming from. You're not going to be able to say, well, this person's done this, now they've done that. But it's a case of looking over time and saying, well, we've been doing that. And have we seen an uplift in people following us on the page, connecting with us on LinkedIn, visiting the web, and try and correlate it that way. And obviously, if people start inquiring about things, then we can ask them where, we ask them where they've learned about us, and that helps us to build a picture of it.
Yeah. And is it already too soon to see the benefits, or uh,
I
of course
think
you
it
can?
is because
Yeah.
we've only just started really doing it seriously. And yeah, I'd say it probably is. Because I'm quite keen to see as well over time. We have seen views of the videos kind of happening afterwards, but it'd be quite good to see how long afterwards that happens. Does that tail off? Do people kind of come back and comment on the posts, even if they're watching it, quite a bit later? So I think there's quite a lot we want to see and and try with it to see how it works. But I think it's definitely an interesting
Yeah,
um,
I think it
an
is.
interesting approach. So
And are you also looking at repurposing the content that you create, or is it just the live session and you can find it on LinkedIn?
yeah, so that's why it's also good because it's content that you can then reuse and break down, and they're quite long sessions. So I think that's a good way. So already we've been trying to like summarize some of the key points from them to then share in like a LinkedIn newsletter or LinkedIn post so that it's kind of can link back to that. But also, yeah, clipping down like once the video's been there a little while, we can clip down parts of it, which you can then put as separate social posts. You can post on other social channels, using emails. So yeah, I think that. And also something we haven't got around to doing yet, but I think is a good idea, and I want to, is making an audio podcast version of it as well, taking the audio of the recording and putting it out there as a podcast. Because when it's a discussion, especially when it's a panel discussion, there's no need you don't need the visuals. And yeah, that's another way of helping people reach the content. So
Yeah, indeed. I saw some people who are started doing this, but of course, you can do it for all topics. Sometimes you have something you share on the screen, and it's important to see it. But
Yeah,
for a lot of formats, I think it can work very good.
yeah,
Then the event part.
yeah.
I think you are talking at events yourself too, or are you just helping customers with it?
Um, well, so we run our own event. So we put on two actually events now. So we do the International Search Summit and the International Social Summit. So they are events in Barcelona, which are dedicated to international marketing topics basically. So the search one is all about search marketing. So we do SEO, content, paid. And then the social one is obviously all about social media, but all of it's around how to do it when you're trying to do it at scale in different languages for multiple cultures and markets and that kind of thing. So we've been doing it a long time now, but it's really grown in the past couple of years now, especially the search one. Um, so we yeah, that's kind of our primary focus and how we kind of get our name out there and people to know about Webcertain is through doing the events. We do also help clients run events if they want to, which isn't something we do a huge amount of, but we do it. And so we've got one this week that we're doing a virtual event for clients. So I'm a big believer in events as being really valuable especially in B2B. I think they really
I can imagine
can
that the
be a really good
competition, yeah, the competition is a bit harder. I think when you compare it to LinkedIn Live sessions, there
Mhm.
are a lot of events. So
Yeah,
is it hard to promote it and to get people to your event?
yeah, yeah. It is hard. It is not. It is definitely not easy to do because yeah, there are a lot of events, and there are a lot of events that are well known and that are established that people go to. And if people are going to, it's like everything, like we were saying before. You know, if people are going to commit money to anything and time to something, they want to know it's going to be good and it's going to be worth their time. So, um, that's why I think we've been doing, it takes time. I think you're very lucky if you launch an event and, have it huge after the first time you've launched it, unless you're a really huge, massive company with huge budgets and a huge community already. But if you're not, then I think you have to start slow and build it up and accept that it isn't going to be something, it's not an overnight thing. It takes time. So it's another one of these kind of strategies that people don't always like and kind of senior management don't always like because it's not a quick win. It's not, you say, oh, well, I think we should run an event. Okay, what's that going to bring? Well, it probably won't bring us anything for a bit of time because it is going to take time for people to know about it, to build up some reputation around it. And then also it can work really well to generate, leads for the business, but they don't always come straight away. It's not like you're going to have the day after the event, everybody who's been there says, oh, right, can we work with you? Sometimes it can be months or even years down the line when they're ready to go into a certain service, or whether the person who's been there has moved to a company that then now needs it. So it's a bit of a long-term strategy, but it can work really well for all of the kind of aspects, for kind of reputation, for awareness, but also for kind of being able to then showcase why you're good at what you do.
Yeah, maybe then the benefit that you have is that you are in a bit of a niche. There are a lot of, for example, search or social events,
Yeah,
but maybe you are the only one about the international part, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think we are the only one that fully of the kind of conference we are of the and that focus that really make a point of saying it's purely about international, and that's why the event started, which was years and years and years ago. We started it, and we've done it in kind of slightly different ways over the years, but basically it was because we'd go to events and there'd be maybe one session on the whole 2 day agenda that talked about international, and it would be so, a 20-minute session that would literally,
The
cover the
basics.
very top level, and it was not useful or helpful in any way really if you're trying to know more. So we were like, well, why don't we do something that actually really goes into the detail? So it's good in that way that it's niche, but also it means that it's not for everybody. So, that everybody working in search doesn't necessarily want to come because they're not doing international. It's not particularly useful for them. So we're kind of looking for the people that are, um, doing that kind of work. But it is. It's just great because it you get that then experience of people really like events, and I think that hasn't changed, and people seem to more than ever actually really get kind of a buzz from being in an event and being around people. I think maybe more people are working remotely after the past few years and aren't seeing people out often perhaps, or just the having that period of not being able to travel and not being able to meet people has really kind of reignited people's interest for it. And I think, you see people and it's such a nice experience to see when people are just like meeting people from all over the place, people they would never have met before, and just, I think it's
Yeah,
only going to keep going that people want to do those kind of events. So I think if you can offer that for people, it can be a really great way to boost your brand and to get to get some good awareness out there.
yeah. And Barcelona is a nice place to go, I think, for
Yeah.
for an event.
It helps. I mean, I would definitely give that as advice if anybody is going to start an event, do think about where it is, because it does play a role. You'd laugh and people say, oh, I'd like to go to Barcelona, but if you've got the choice between two events and one somewhere that you really don't want to go and it's maybe quite difficult to travel to or very expensive to stay in, versus somewhere that's got loads of flights, isn't that expensive, is somewhere you'd quite like to stay for the weekend, you're probably
Well,
going to pick
that's
that one. So
yeah, that's for me the reason that I go to Brighton SEO, because I
yeah,
like to drink beers with SEO people I know in Brighton, and
yeah,
I can do
yeah,
that there. It's
yeah,
better than Amsterdam for
exactly.
me.
Yeah, no, exactly, though, that's the thing. If it's somewhere that people like to be and that have the right people to meet with, but also it's a location that is appealing, then yeah. And I think that's, a lot of people have said, but why don't you do it in London? You're in the UK. And it's like, well, London's actually a really hard place to run an event. There is a lot already there, but people don't want to come to London that much. The travel to, yeah, you could fly to London quite easily from places, but it's very expensive to stay there and be there. And people are kind of done a bit with London. I think a lot of times people don't really want to go, whereas Barcelona, it's different, or other, even Brighton is a bit more like, oh, it's on the coast, it's a bit different. People like something a bit, you know, you
Yeah,
you yes,
I
you're
I
going to
like
learn.
London, but I'm
Yeah.
not from the UK, so that's different maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, let's see if I had. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about. You also mentioned the social event.
Mhm.
What are the biggest challenges there for international companies? I can
I
imagine it can
think,
be very complex with all the profiles and yeah,
yeah.
language.
I think that's where it can get a bit more challenging, because the nature of social is that it needs to be kind of reactive. It needs to be this two-way engagement. You can't just, with your website, you obviously can plan content. Yes, you might need to keep it updated, but you can do some pages, and generally once you've worked on them, they're there and people can find them, and you just keep checking on them almost. Whereas with social, it's kind of, you need to be always on. You can't, if you want to really build a social engagement, you can't just put some posts out and twice a week and not really look at it. You need to be able to respond. You need to be able to, look at what your people following your brand are talking about and doing and getting in that conversation. So I think can be a challenge, because you do need more. If you're going to do it really well, you're going to need resources. You're going to need people who can um, manage those channels in every market and do that job really. And I think that is the only way to really do it fully properly, is to have people speaking the language, in charge of each country to do it, um, to
Yeah,
manage those. But there are ways to do it. You can still have some kind of presence. Maybe, you can still, I think it's just a case of, maybe if you don't have, a social media manager for every country or multiple of them, you probably don't want to have 14 different social channels. Maybe you just have to pick one, and find the best, the one that's going to be most relevant for your audience, and then put the effort into that one, rather than trying to do loads badly. I think that's the mistake. If you just think we need a profile on every social platform in every country, but then you're not really adding any content and you're not engaging on it, then it's a waste of time.
yeah. And the people part is very important, of course, for example, LinkedIn.
Yeah,
We'd rather follow people than companies.
yeah,
Um, and I can imagine that sometimes the English language can also be okay for example, people in Germany or the
yeah,
Netherlands. But Yeah,
I think in
if you don't,
B2B, that is probably more true for social, that especially with LinkedIn, a lot of business is done in English anyway. And depending on where you're targeting, different if if you're going to be targeting some of the Asian markets, you need to be on different platforms and you need to probably be speaking those languages more. But I think, yeah, for like Western Europe, if you're targeting the Netherlands, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, they can, they're most like, they're probably going to be talking on LinkedIn often in English themselves anyway, because it's a more wider conversation. So that way, I think you can manage it easier. Um, Again, it just depends on the audience, and that's where your research comes in. Is your audience mainly speaking in English? If they are, fine. If they're not, and you see a lot of conversations in Germany happening in German in groups, then you would need to think about that. And um,
yeah,
it will just, yeah, depend on what you're trying to achieve and how important you think a certain channel is as to how much you're going to invest in building it up well.
indeed. Do you already have an answer for the, the first question of the conversation? Otherwise, we are going to the last question.
Okay, what do people not know about me? Right, this is, maybe it's embarrassing, but I really love musicals. I think they're the
That's
best
not
things ever.
embarrassing, right?
Yeah, some people would say it is, but there you go. That's my, like, that is the best thing I could ever do for me, is like take me to see a musical, because I just like them. I think they take you away from all of the serious stuff and the things you have to do, and just are really fun. And yeah, so there you go.
All right,
My guilty
great.
pleasure.
Then the last question. If you could go back with a time machine 10 years, what advice would you give yourself?
um 10 years ago. I, I think to if it's coming to kind of marketing and thinking about work, then I think it would be to not get distracted by everything that goes on, not think that you have to always be chasing the new thing and worrying about what's happening, and just keep the basics, keep the fundamentals in mind. Yes, things will change, you need to adapt them, but don't worry that something new happens and it changes everything you knew, because actually what you know stays the same. What is important actually has stayed the same all the last 15 years, I would say. And it's just the way you do it maybe evolves a bit, but the actual principles of it stay the same. And I think not to, yeah, not to get distracted basically by things that are happening and forget the basics and the important things.
Yeah, I like that. Great advice. Thanks a lot. Where can people find or follow you?
Yeah, so mainly on LinkedIn now is the best place. So Gemma Houghton on LinkedIn, and also Webcertain on LinkedIn is the company page, which is where the LinkedIn Lives happen. And then if they want to find me in person, the best place is at the International Search Summit in November in Barcelona, or May for the Social Summit. So definitely, if you are at all interested in international, check out those events, because I am biased, but they are good, and
Yeah,
we will make it a good experience if you want to come.
great. Thanks a lot for the nice conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Inbound Forecast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or in your favourite podcast app.